Hello guys, welcome to A2 Sports History Screencast 3. This is your kind of final history screencast, normal format. Stop the question. Press pause after the question, see what you know. If you need help on a memory method, I'll try to put something in the middle and then try to build up your answers. These screencasts obviously are for Saturday, but for the people who can't come Saturday or can't come and do a catch-up session Monday or Tuesday, it's absolutely vital. I've spent quite loads of time putting the screencast together, and if you can go through all three sets of XFIS, sports history and sports psychology screencasts and answer those questions when it comes to the exam, we've got a massive chance of being able to get good marks in this exam. That, alongside the 20-mark question information I've sent you, you really should be in a good position, but if you just don't use them, you'll regret it. Okay, these are the marginal differences that can make, take you onto an A grade or a B grade and send you off to university or the job that you want to do. So just think about that. Okay, right. Main focus of this screencast is going to be on case study stuff, as people particularly have expressed concern about tennis. I've kind of gone quite heavy on that with this. So, starting off. Describe the characteristics of real tennis. Explain why there is limited participation in real tennis today. So, if you do feel like you know that now, pause it. Write down what you think the answer is. Okay, so basically the memory method for this is pluck it, grow opposite. Okay, and then you have to say why. Now remember, real tennis is the anomaly of popular recreations. It's different to every other rational recreation. Why? Because it's the opposite of pluck it, grow. So putting that into answers with some specific information. Remember, you have to, when it's a case study, talk about specific things going on. Okay, so instead of being local, it was not local, it was non-local. Okay, the reason why is because upper class of transport, so for example horse and cart, will take them to the local market towns. It was regular. It was played weekly, as upper class would take part after the weekly market in local areas. Then you have courtly. It was specific to the courtly or to the upper class. Okay, that's because they had the time and the money to for the equipment and the facilities, which are both specialist and expensive. Okay, so it's a purpose-built court. All these things will get you marks if you want to put them on top. If it's a 20-mark question, obviously you'll be talking about the fact that it's a purpose-built court rather than the simple natural environment where the lower class might play activities such as fives, or in stage 1 of public school they might play fives against a wall. Okay, it's also non-violent, as it was kind of a sophisticated game based around skill rather than kind of brutality or violence. It was coded and it had complex written rules. Okay, it was possible because it was upper class. It was played. Goes back into kind of 1600s, 1700s from France. It was played by the kind of aristocrats of France. So it's really, really upper class sport. And then you go down to the bottom here. Why is there a lack of participation in real tennis today? Now the key thing I would say for this is that the fact that there's a lack of facilities for real tennis, okay, because obviously lawn tennis has taken over, or tennis as we know it, and also there's a lack of role models. Okay, so there's a couple of reasons why there is a real lack of popularity today. There's a lack of media hype, so you don't get it on the media, etc. Moving on. Next question. Okay, so what we're looking for here then, I'm just going to go back one. So what I want you to do now is you compare real tennis with lawn tennis. Okay, so lawn tennis was created after, so it's the kind of rational recreation version. Okay, but it is quite specific in its comparisons. And most rational recreations, we have that kind of concept of the opposite to pluck kick row, but we've already used that for real tennis and lawn tennis. The comparisons we use here are quite specific, and we have to link them to kind of 4 key factors, and those 4 key factors are based around the gender, class, courts. Okay, so if we start off, we've got gender then. So you're looking here. So real tennis was not played by women. Real tennis was the solely male preserve, and the reason why women weren't allowed to play real tennis is because the upper class believed, and the kind of early stereotypes of women based around that kind of dancing and rolling whilst giving birth reveals unladylike status. That is why you'd only put all that information if it's a 20-mark question. Certainly not if it's a short question. Okay. Whereas on the flip side, In contrast, lawn tennis was the symbol for the emancipation or the liberation of women. Okay, it was the first time that women were considered, equal and allowed to play sport. Okay, now there were lots of kind of contradictions in this. If it was kind of, I'll go down to here now. You can have a little look. So you've got to. It helped break down Victorian gender stereotypes as men and women could play together. The reason why it became so popular is because it was kind of a social occasion. It was often used as kind of, although it was like a vehicle for the emancipation of women, it often meant it was a way that women had to be paired with males. Okay, so it was this very slow emancipation. It was also considered a social occasion. Okay, because people could play it in their back gardens, which we'll come to later. And I've put down here some information about women. Although they were allowed to play, they weren't allowed to wear revealing clothing. They weren't supposed to be vigorous in the activity because of the aforementioned things based around these Victorian stereotypes up here. All this information is too much if it was a short question, but if it's a 20, certainly stuff you'd be putting in. And also they couldn't be seen by the general public. So that's the key thing on gender. Class, on the other hand, so we're going on to here. So real tennis was only played by the upper class. Okay, it was exclusive due to expensive facilities, equipment, etc., transport that was required. Lawn tennis, okay, was basically the kind of, I suppose, the catalyst of middle class emergence. It showed that the middle class, it was exclusive to them. Now, because the upper class refused to kind of let middle class participate in real tennis, you had this kind of Walter Wingfield decided that he was going to create a game, okay, that was going to be specific or solely the preserve of the middle class. Okay, so basically you have this there, so class distinction, real tennis upper class, why? Lawn tennis, middle class, catalyst for the emergence of the middle class, the new middle class. Okay, and Walter Wingfield was the person responsible for that. Now, you've got a little bit down here, so linked to class, because obviously we're talking about class, you've got middle class kind of public schools. Now, in stage 3, lawn tennis was not popular at all in public schools, as it was considered a girls' sport. Okay, and it wasn't space efficient, as it isn't to this day. The amount of people you can get in a games field at public school way outweighed what you could get on tennis courts, and also it was like I said, less efficient with space. Courts, so lawn tennis was originally played on like kind of hourglass courts, but then it was kind of, I suppose, adapted based around people's back gardens, so it was into a rectangular shape as we know it today. Okay, whereas real tennis was played on purpose-built courts, usually close to market towns, inexpensive buildings. So that's what you've got there. There's your key kind of comparisons for that. Now, if I go on to tennis today, now factors affecting participation in tennis today, what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to think about, whenever you get to this point and it asks you about today, you need to be able to think about, one, what factors affect participation in terms of barriers, and then also what things could promote participation. Now, I've put together this as a mnemonic. I think this is quite important. I have a feeling about tennis today, or a comparison with tennis today. It's been a while since it's come up at all. Okay, so this is a mnemonic I've used for this. So you're going to have to work on this. Okay, you've got kind of 7 days to try and get this stuck in your head. It worked for me. I only came up with it yesterday. So finding space for real tennis courts in the middle of summer may be difficult. Now, what you're using there is the sentence. The sentence is in context. It's about tennis. Okay, obviously I'll put real tennis on there. But each of those words has a link, except for of, to a kind of factor that could either positively or negatively impact upon participation. So we're looking for, first up, finding links to funding. Okay, there's been a decrease in funding from Sport England due to a lack of participation. So the LTA, the Lawn Tennis Association, had funding cut due to their whole sport plan not being efficiently kind of participated in. Space, it's not very space efficient. It's similar to what we said about public schools in comparison to team games. The 4 goes to another F, which is looking at facilities. So we now have facilities such as David Lloyd Leisure, which transcend the fitness industry and tennis. So you can do both. So that's a positive. Real turns to role. Okay, so role models such as Andy Murray and Laura Robson are created, which was due to increased kind of media coverage. So you've got 2 marks there: role models and media coverage. However, you could say that although they are role models, There isn't much, is there? I bet not many of you have heard of Laura Robson. Andy Murray's probably the only real one for us to look up to. Then you've got tennis. Tennis turns into another T, into technology. You might start to notice that some of these are very, very kind of linked to what we've talked about with cricket before in relation to today. So technology, there's an increased quality of rackets, carbon fibre, expensive rackets. So we talked about cricket bats, if you remember. Courts, okay, so the positive is there's a wide variety of surfaces to increase participation. So you have tarmac, you have grass, you have AstroTurf, etc. In turns to initiatives, so there are kind of tennis for free initiatives in inner city areas. You have cardio tennis, you have short tennis, and these things are used in school now to kind of like make it a little bit more accessible due to the last bit down here, which I talked about, which is difficult. Okay, it's an extremely difficult sport, so they've tried to think of ways to make it easier and more fun-based. A big barrier is the fact it's still considered a middle-class sport. So it's expensive to play, it's expensive to travel to events, it's expensive to join clubs. So that's something else. Summer is a big factor. It's a summer sport. Okay, now obviously that is difficult, as we've discussed with cricket, due to weather, school exams. And then you've got maybe that turns into media coverage, which I kind of mentioned earlier. So if the question was linked to class, obviously to watch tennis year round, you have to have Sky TV, whereas you can obviously see Wimbledon on BBC. So there are your key factors affecting tennis today. Moving on then, explain the influence of the university melting pot on Oxbridge graduates on the development of rational recreation between 1850 and 1900. Okay, so this is basically an ASPE question. So what was the university influence, the university melting pot? So when the boys went from public schools to university, what was the influence on rational recreation? Because they all went with a mishmash of rules, what did they have to create, etc. So if I went from there, then what happened from when the boys left university? Okay, how did that influence the development of rational recreation between 1850 and 1900? So key things we're looking at here then. Melting pot. The common rule book was required, so national governing bodies such as the FA were formed in 1863. I've just put an example, they don't have to know that date. So this allowed increase in fixtures because people were playing the same rules. So that's when factory teams started to kind of go and travel and play. How did Oxbridge graduates influence the development of rational recreation? Well, they had business administration skills to create rule books. Okay, they also returned to public schools as games masters or assistant masters, where they acted as role models. If you remember, we talked about this in ASPE, and they're exactly the same as ASPE. Careers such as army officers took them abroad to allow them to spread these sports to our colonies. So, for example, rugby to Australia. And also you have careers such as vicars, which would allow the spread of games via parish teams within churches. Okay. In England or in Great Britain. Okay, moving on then. Explain the social and cultural factors affecting athletics as a rational recreation. Okay, now remember this could be part of a 20. If it is, you have to make sure, and even if it's not, even if it's 6, you have to make sure you're being very specific with your answers. So when we're looking at these, we're looking for opposite to pluck a crow, but only the points that work, and be specific with examples where possible. So we need to make sure we've got names, okay? We need to make sure we've got governing bodies, and I'll move on from there then. So what you've got, okay, instead of it being local, it was regional, so the formation of railways, as with everything else, allowed spectatorism, and also and participation to start to move nationwide. Now, this is some specific information, touring runners such as Native Indian, American, some called Deerfoot, being able to travel from America and race for money. Okay, instead of being uncoded, it was coded. This led to the formation of the Amateur Athletics Club and later the Amateur Athletics Association by the ex-public school boys. So basically, if I said to you quickly, or look back at this, the Amateur Athletics Club were responsible for the exclusion clause because they did not want lower class performers running because they were earning money from it. So instead of it being courtly popular, it's now a 3-class society. Lower class competed as professionals for money, which led to a win ethic and deviance via disguise of form. I'll talk about that later. Middle class competed for intrinsic values and set up national symbolics. So there's a bit of repetition here. The thing I need you to understand is the AAC, the Amateur Athletics Club, was responsible for the exclusion clause. This stopped lower class professionals taking part, whereas the Amateur Athletics Association was set up to counter this, and they allowed lower class to participate as professionals. It was